All right, ladies and gentlemen and friends beyond the binary, wash your hands. Put your hair up and in a hat if you shed as much as I do. Grab your vegetables and a knife and let's make some dumplings. So, our first vegetable that I'm going to teach you how to cut is an onion. These are way easier to dice than people realize. So, step one, you'll notice on the onion that it's got kind of two ends. It's got this like kind of weird stringy rough end, and then it has the end that I call the tail or the butt of the onion. I have a really tiny onion. If you have a normal sized onion, that's even better. If you've got a tiny onion, we welcome all onions here, right? So step one is we're going to cut off the little tail end of our onions so that we have a flat surface to put the onion down on. So we're going to make sure that our fingers are well out of the way and tucked under. And voila. Now we can put that flat side down on the bottom of our cutting board. And now we're going to cut the onion in half through this rough side. So we're going to be cutting it kind of like right across the end here. And the reason we leave this end on is this end is going to kind of hold our onion together while we're dicing. So once we have that done, pick your favorite half, whichever one's your favorite half. Do that one second. Grab your least favorite half to do first. And we'll just take off the outside kind of peel of the onion. Once I made a chili and forgot to take this off, and it was a disaster. So don't be like me. And get that out of there. So next step is we're gonna take this kind of end of the onion, the face of the onion, if the other one's the butt, and we're gonna face that away from us. So I'll face it toward you. And then we're gonna take our knife and make forward slits in the onion without cutting it all the way through. So we're gonna be kind of cutting from the bottom of the onion up until almost to the top. So that way we have cuts in the onion, but the onion isn't gonna fall apart, if that makes sense. So I'll show you. We're gonna cut it into little sections. So it should look like this. See how there's these cuts, but they don't go all the way through the onion. They just kind of go almost to the end. So once you've done that, we can turn our onion to the left, and then you're gonna just chop your onion this way so that you get a perfectly even dice all the way through. So we're just gonna kind of chop through those slits we made, going the opposite direction. And there you go. So now we can do our favorite half. Speed, 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 speed. So now that we're done dicing our onion, grab a big old bowl and throw that onion in there. That onion's the first one to the party. Maybe he's making some chips and salsa for his other friends to get there. Maybe he's researching how to have a fun Zoom birthday party. Maybe he's like lighting candles. We don't know. He's just preparing. He's first one there. First one arrived fashionably early. So next we will dice some carrots. So I'm going to teach you a couple different ways to dice shred carrots, depending on kind of what you have available to you. The first way I will teach you is just with your trusty knife. So obviously a carrot is a circular shape, so it's going to kind of roll around. So you need to be very careful and move very slowly when cutting a carrot. Usually the first step for me is I'm going to cut this kind of yucky end off. And then sometimes the bottom can be gross too, and you can cut that off, kind of personal preference. Some people like to peel their carrots. I like the skin, so I just wash them, but if you want to peel it, go off. And so now we're going to cut this carrot in half so that it has a flat surface. So again, this is circular, so we need to be very careful. So step one is you're going to very carefully, very slowly just put a slit in the carrot like that. So we're not cutting it all the way through, we're just really slowly kind of getting a slit in there. Once that slit is done, we're gonna put our other hand on top of the knife like this to keep our fingers out of harm's way, and slowly just push down on the knife until we have two little carrot friends. So once you have two halves, now this can sit flat on the cutting board. And again, kind of just using my second knuckles, so the knuckles right above my fingernails. I'm gonna hold this still and just guide the knife through it. I'm gonna try and cut as thin as I can. I find it easy to kind of continue that same thing where you cut a little bit and then you put your hand on top. That way you just know that you're not gonna cut yourself, and if something, I don't know, just add some more force, especially when you get to the end here. See, when we get to the end there, really being careful, just doing this as slowly as you can, especially if you're not super experienced in the kitchen. And when you get to the end, you can kind of flip it to the other side, and it will make it easier to cut so that it doesn't kind of keep rolling around like that one just did. So once you have these thin little strips, we're just gonna dice them, kind of like we did the onions. So that just means we're gonna cut them the opposite way. So you can kind of hold the bunch in your left hand or your non-dominant hand. And then we're just gonna very thinly dice these guys up. So the second way that we can prepare a carrot is using a peeler, like this. So you're gonna grab your carrot. I already kind of started peeling this one. And you're just going to, you don't have to cut off the end because you're gonna use the end to hold on to it and, you know, just give it some comfort and safety. And then we're going to use the peeler, and you can, depending on how thick you want your pieces, you can either just peel in one direction on one side the whole time, and it will make them kind of nice and big and chunky, or you can slowly rotate the carrot as you go and keeping the strips kind of thin. Once your carrot gets kind of like nubby and weird and hard to hold upright, you can just lie it down flat on your cutting board and peel it flat on the cutting board. All right, once you've kind of done all that you can just eat this part of the carrot or do whatever you want with it. Don't throw it away because that's wasteful. Maybe grab some hummus, dip it in there, and then you should have a whole bunch of little carrot ribbons like this. Whether you use the peeler or you use your knife, doesn't really matter all that much. They're both gonna cook well. They're both gonna be great. Once I have all the peelings, I usually just kind of put them in a pile, and again with my non-dominant hand on top of the blade, on the flat side of the blade, I just kind of cut some long ways strips in there, just try to make them little tiny pieces. And then the other way around as well, making little baby carrot guys. What I like about this method is it does make them really thin, and it's a little bit safer cutting wise. Your fingers are gonna be safer, but again, whatever you got. All right, so we're gonna make about 2 cups of carrots. This is like, I'd say about 2 carrots worth, 2 carrots my size worth, but if you only have 1 carrot, that's cool. What I love about this recipe is you're just gonna kind of do your thing, however you wanna do it. And we're gonna put him in a bowl too, separate bowl, because the onions are gonna cook before the carrots do. And then let's just like think about some stuff that we love and we're grateful for. Like our families and getting to see people in person. Yes, I may have accidentally put the carrots in with the onions, we'll figure it out. So next we will do the cabbage. So cutting cabbage is quite the ordeal. So if you've never done it before, listen up and please listen to all the instructions before you start, because again, I don't want anybody hurting their fingers. So step 1 is we're just gonna take kind of the yucky outside layer off of the cabbage so that we got that nice shiny cabbage inside. This is kind of a hefty guy. And then we're gonna cut it in half. So there's a few different ways to cut a cabbage in half. I like to go with the most fun way. So if you put the knot on the bottom of the cutting board and you take your knife and you very carefully start putting your knife through the cabbage until you can put your hand over top, very slowly. Just carefully work your way around. Again, my hand is so far from where I'm cutting. I'm never cutting toward my fingers. You gotta just work it down, like go on one side, the other side. And then when you get some of the way down like this, you can just kind of whack it against the table like this. And there you go. Now you've cut it in half. So once you've cut your cabbage in half, you're gonna go ahead and cut it in half again. This time it's a little easier because it can sit flat on the cutting board. So we're just gonna cut right down the middle again, being really careful of our fingers, taking our time. Perfect, so now we have 2 little quarters. You're probably not gonna need more than a quarter or a half for this recipe. And so now that we've kind of cut it, you can see that it has the knot or the stem. And you can see on the onion or on the cabbage where the stem is. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to cut off most of the stem. We're not gonna cut off the whole stem because then the cabbage is just gonna fall apart and it's gonna make it hard to cut up. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut most of it off. So again, being careful of our fingers, we're just gonna kind of cut down at an angle onto the cutting board so that it looks like that. So see, there's like a very, very, very thin amount of the stem left, but not enough to bother us. And then at this point, you can just chop it across. So we're gonna put the flat side facing, flat side facing you, or on a little bit of an angle. And then you can just once you get to the end, you can kind of just cut away from where the stem is. So you can cut this side off. Or if you're not feeling up to it, you don't have to. So yeah, then you're gonna be left with like little strips like this. And we're just gonna make them a teeny bit smaller because it'd be hard to fit these long pieces in a dumpling. So I'm just gonna, again, very carefully, very slowly, just make them a little bit shorter. So about 2 cups of cabbage. I think that this is gonna be enough for us today. We're gonna put that in another bowl. I'm not gonna mix them up this time. Perfect. Next up, we have our bell peppers. So we're gonna use 1 bell pepper, and we're going to essentially cut a line through the bell pepper all the way around. So we're gonna just very carefully, away from our fingers, put a little slice right beside where, oh, there's some cabbage in the way. Right beside where that green stem starts. And then we're just gonna cut down and all the way around, always carefully staying away from our fingertips until we reach the other side. So see how this is all the way through? And then the fun part is we get to just rip it in half, like this. So now we're gonna take out all the seeds and all the gunk in there, give her a rinse. And these are super easy. Again, we're just gonna keep our fingers out of the way and cut all the way across one way and then move it around and cut it the other way. Simple. Perfect, so we'll put that in yet another bowl. And you know what, if you don't have bowls, just put them around. You know, if you make as big of a mess as I do, you're gonna have to clean up anyway. You might as well just put them wherever, as long as you clean up, make the place look better than when you found it. Garlic time. These are the weirdest looking little things, huh? Okay, so first up, we're gonna cut off the tail of the garlic, kind of keep them with our onion theme. Garlic and onions are related. They're like cousins, they're boys. So once you have the tail off, you can kind of start just ripping. There's all these little like pods in here that will kind of rip right out. So you can take these guys out. You don't want to cut the tail too short because then you might end up with something like that. But if you do, it's not the end of the world. For this recipe, we're gonna use like around three or four of these little pods. And then you can put the rest of the garlic away for later. It doesn't need to be refrigerated. You can just keep it out in the open in your kitchen. And so now we're gonna talk about how to dice these, how to mince them. So if you have a garlic mincer, that's like kind of a thing you can just put it right into. That's great. If you're someone like me who doesn't, then we're just gonna chop them up. So the first step is we've gotta get this paper off of it, which is harder to do than you'd think. So there's a bit of a trick for that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put our little pod of garlic down on the cutting board, and then we're gonna use the flat side of our knife to push down on it. You hear it crack a little bit, and that's gonna make it way easier for us to peel it. So it's gonna break it up into little sections. So now it's just kind of like this kind of slimy, nice smelling little garlic pod. So you're gonna do like 3 or 4 of those. All right, so like I said, this is the cousin of the onion. So these guys also have like a little face, a little kind of like knotty area, and we can actually dice them just like we diced our onion. But again, they're really tiny, so you gotta be really, really careful with your cuts. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the face, the part with the little knot, faced away from us, and make little teeny tiny slits in our garlic, being very mindful of our fingers, just using the very tip of the knife, and then we can turn the garlic and chop it this way. Again, really careful of your fingers. If at any point you feel like you're gonna cut your fingers or you're feeling unsafe, you can just kind of improvise and do a fingerless garlic chop moment. Like that. So you're gonna do that for all 3. If yours are kind of small, maybe do 4. If you really like garlic, go crazy and do 5. We're gonna do about a tablespoon, if that helps. Got that done. If you want to just give it a couple more loose chops, just to kind of get it as little as you can. You don't want to have like a big fat bite of garlic in your food. It's never good. You'd think it would be good, but too much garlic is not a good time. All right, so once we got them looking pretty tiny like that, you're gonna go ahead and put them, you can put them with the onions. When I'm prepping, I like to put everything in its own bowl, just because sometimes I move really fast and I don't listen to instructions well, and then I find myself combining things that don't go together, like the carrots and the onions. So I forgot my own rule earlier, but generally speaking, I think it's usually a lot easier just kind of when you're prepping vegetables to put them all separate. Ginger time. Okay, so ginger is very weird looking, and it has this weird papery skin on it. And there's a couple different ways you can get rid of the skin on a ginger root before you mince it or chop it up. My favorite way is just using a spoon. So if you grab just a small kitchen spoon, whatever you kind of got in the kitchen, and you angle your ginger down, you can use the back of the spoon, the tip of the back of the spoon, to peel off that skin. So it might be a little bit hard at first to get kind of the first little bit in, but then after that, it gets really easy. Once you have about, probably around this much, trying to get like a tablespoon, you should be good to go. If you can't get all of the skin off, don't stress it too much. In some cultures, they keep like a bunch of the skin on. So it's not gonna kill you if you have some on, but it can be a little bit papery and weird. So definitely try to get as much off as you can. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cut the ginger into little kind of circles. So I like to start on the small end just because then you have more to hold on to with your fingers. And we are not gonna need to use this whole piece, but you're just gonna. So now you've got all these little ginger circles that are nice and not papery. And now we're just gonna kind of chop these up the same way. So if you just kind of put them in a pile on your cutting board and put your hand on the back on the flat end of your knife, you can just chop them all in one direction. And then in the other direction. You can never over chop garlic and ginger. You can never make them too small. So, you know, if you have a really bad day sometime and you just need to cut up some vegetables, it's a really good one to cut because you can just cut it forever and ever and ever and ever. And it's never gonna be too small. So I'll put that guy away. Okay, so just like we used a little kitchen spoon for our ginger, in order to have a really easy time cutting up our cilantro, we're gonna use a fork. So, you know when The Little Mermaid, when Ariel's brushing her hair with a fork? We're pretty much gonna brush the hair of this cilantro with a fork just to get it off of all of the stems. And so it's super, super, super quick and easy, and you don't have to spend all this time separating them out one by one until you have just like a little pile. And then you can save this for guacamole. That's the second time I've brought up guacamole. So if you did end up kind of getting some stems in there, you can leave them in, you can take them out, I take them out. So cutting cilantro is just gonna take some patience. We're gonna do the same thing. We're just gonna essentially chop it in both directions until it's nice and small. We have about a tablespoon of it, and then we can throw it in its own bowl. All right, so it should look like just little itty bitty pieces. We'll take about a tablespoon of that. You can measure it if you want. All right, so our scallions or green onions are like a garnish. We're gonna use them at the very end and they're gonna go on top of our dumplings. So you can kind of cut up as many of these as you'd like, depending on your taste. I love scallions, so I'm gonna cut up a whole bunch of them. I think I have 4 here. And for this recipe, we're gonna cut them into very small pieces. Sometimes you cut them on an angle so that they're nice and big. You'd use that for like a jambalaya or like a more Spanish recipe. But for this recipe and other Asian recipes, we usually cut our scallion very, very little. So I'm just gonna have the white stem kind of on the left side. I've got them all grouped up. I'm gonna cut them all at once. And then you're just gonna make a lot of really tiny cuts kind of going all the way down the vegetable. Notice how I keep moving my hand down very, very early before the knife gets anywhere near my hand. And so you can cut that kind of right about down to the white or kind of where the green starts, depending on how you like your scallions. And then we'll put these away and save them for the very end of the recipe. Okay, so our last vegetable, you can use either mushrooms or tofu. If you're using mushrooms, just dice up the mushrooms kind of like everything else, leaving the stems out. But if you're like me and you hate mushrooms and you want some protein in your dish, you can use some tofu. So I've pressed this tofu for a couple hours. So what that means is I put it in between 2 plates or like 2 bowls or even something like this. And then I put something heavy on top. And so what that does is it squeezes out all the gross kind of tofu water that it sits in before, and it makes it not so spongy. That's usually why people hate tofu, because they've had like really spongy, soggy tofu. So even if you press your tofu just for like a half hour, it will make a really big difference. Even better if you can do it like overnight in your fridge, even, you know, like putting it in a bowl with another bowl on top, or like 2 plates in a pot. Just be safe to know that it's not gonna like fall over or topple over. So to prepare my tofu, I'm gonna put it in the bottom of this bowl, and then I just use the bottom of a wooden spoon. You can use anything kind of flat. You could use a potato masher, you could use a fork, you can really use whatever you want. We're just gonna mash it up so that it's in like little clumps, essentially. All right, that's another process you can just kind of do forever if you want, but you're gonna just kind of keep mashing it until it looks like this, just little tofu chunks. It's gonna go inside the dumpling. So now we finished all of our vegetable prep work. I've also gone ahead and kind of pre-measured out the rice vinegar and the soy sauce to make life easier while we're cooking. And now that everything's prepared and ready for us to cook, it's gonna make our lives much better. So also keep your oil handy. And first up, we're gonna just put some oil in the pan on medium heat with the onions, ginger, and garlic. Okay, so I'm gonna do about 3 tablespoons of our oil, just kind of whatever you're feeling. And then our onion, not the green onion, the red onion. Garlic and ginger. And you can grab that wooden spoon back. And then we're just gonna kind of move this around and cook it on medium heat until everything is translucent. All right, so after a couple minutes, your onions should be looking like this, all soft and kind of see-through, nice and fragrant. So once we're here, we're going to add the bell pepper and either the tofu or the mushroom, or if you're crazy, maybe both. And we're just gonna kind of keep stirring this around on medium heat until both are soft. So until your mushrooms are soft and your peppers are soft, or until your peppers and tofu are soft and the tofu is like a little bit brown. So I'll show you what that looks like when it's done. Once our tofu and bell pepper or mushroom is looking soft and the tofu is just a tiny bit brown, now we're going to add our carrot and our cabbage. And we're just gonna mix this around for another like 3 minutes-ish, and then we're gonna take the whole thing off of heat completely. This is also a perfect time to add some salt and pepper in there, and just mix that all in. All right, once everybody is mixed in there, looking good and happy, we can turn off the heat and give the whole thing some time to cool, maybe like 5-10 minutes, let it cool down. I have given my mixture here some time to cool and moved it onto my cutting board on the kitchen table. So now we're just gonna kind of add the rest of our ingredients to here. So we've got our rice vinegar. It's about like 3 tablespoons of rice vinegar, the cilantro, your soy sauce, about 2 tablespoons of soy sauce. You can add like a little bit of sesame oil too. And then we're going to add not all of the green onion, but most of the green onion. We're gonna save some for the end to put on top. So we'll just mix this in. And then once that's all mixed in, you have your inside of your dumplings. Now that our filling is complete, it is time to do the fun part and make some dumplings. Make sure you wash your hands again. If you're like me, you've been eating while you were cooking this whole time, and this is a very hands-on process, so definitely wash your hands one more time. And then grab yourself a small bowl of either water or egg, like if you want to just mix up a little bit of egg, or I'm using actually the liquid from a can of chickpeas. This is just going to be kind of the binding agent so that we can make these keep their shape. I find that the chickpea liquid or eggs work a little bit better than water just to kind of keep it all intact, but whatever you got is gonna work just fine. And this is probably a part where I'd go get like a sibling or a parent or a pal to come help you, because this can get a little bit repetitive and it's a fun new skill to learn together. So you're gonna grab something like a cutting board, a baking sheet, whatever you got, just to put your dumplings on so that you can move them around easily. And you're gonna grab a small kitchen spoon and grab a small spoonful of our filling. So about that much filling. I'm gonna place it, I have this kind of in a triangle, so I've got the end facing you. I'm just gonna place this little spoonful of dumpling in the middle, just like that. So now I'm gonna pick a hand. I'm gonna pick my right hand because I'm right-handed, and I'm gonna put my finger in my chickpea liquid or water or egg, and I'm going to do the two corners away from me. So from the top of the wonton down to the side on both sides. So just to show you, it would be like from here to here and then here to here. Once I'm done with that, I'm gonna take the bottom corner and fold it up to make a little triangle and just push this together so that it makes a little almost like a little taco. And I'm going to continue moving down, pressing the edges toward each other, trying to keep air out of the middle of my dumpling. So this might take a little bit, some trial and error. You can always spend some time on YouTube and find fun, cool ways to fold them and tips and tricks. I would just say, try it a couple times. It gets easier as you go. And when you're done, it should look something like this. So you can leave it just like this. This is perfect. It's gonna cook beautifully. Or if you wanna get a little bit fancy with it, you can grab some more of your water or egg or chickpea and put it on the edges and then fold these little edges together, and then it's gonna make this cute little dude like that. So either way, try both ways. If they rip and tear or if things go wrong, try not to get frustrated. That's why it comes with so many of these. So you can just kind of keep trying and trying and trying until it's easier. You can also, after you've kind of folded it in half, if you lift it up, you can usually kind of feel around for air bubbles and just very gently kind of push the filling toward the middle, just continuing to press the wrapper together. And that usually just makes it work a little bit better, makes it a little bit cleaner. If there's too much air in them, then they will tear while they're cooking, which again, isn't the end of the world, but and practice makes perfect. So do your thing. Okay, so once you have made your desired amount of dumplings, I have 10 or so here, we can start to cook them. If you make a whole bunch and you don't want to cook them all at once, you can cover the ones that you've made in flour and put them in the freezer and cook them whenever you want. Or if you want to leave kind of the dumpling stuffing out, it should be good in the fridge for 4 days. So if you want to kind of make half now and half later, you can do whatever you want. So we're gonna heat a new pan on medium heat and put in probably 2 tablespoons of sesame oil and let that heat up for a second. You'll know that it's ready when we're gonna have some water on standby. Have about 1/8 of a cup of water on standby, depending how big your pan is. And if you dip your fingers into the water and just put a drop in the pan and it sizzles, then you'll know that the oil is hot enough for you to add the dumplings. If it doesn't sizzle yet, then it's not ready. So I'll show you what I mean when it's warm enough. All right, so when you put a bit of water in there and it makes that sound, you know that your oil is done. So turn your heat down just a little bit, and then we're going to start very carefully adding our dumplings to the skillet. Try not to let them touch too much. It's not the end of the world if they do, but it'll make your life a little bit easier. So I made both different types. Careful with your fingers. So we're gonna let these cook in the oil for about 3 or 4 minutes until there's a bit of a crust on the bottom, and then we will add the water. So after a couple minutes, when the bottom has a little bit of crust on it, like you can see right there, you're going to get your water ready and your lid ready. And we're gonna pour the water in and then put the lid on until all the water is gone. So I'm making very few right now, so I'm only gonna use like maybe 1/8 of a cup of water. If you're making like a full pot's worth, you should probably use 1/4 of a cup of water. And make sure that you're kind of standing back because the oil could kind of spray a little bit. So be very careful when adding the water. So we're gonna add the water. And we'll let that cook until there's no more water in the pan, and then we're just about done. There's evaporating. Feel free to mix the pot around just a teeny little bit every once in a while. Just kind of get them moving and get the water pretty evenly distributed in the pot. So once all the water is out, you can put all of your dumplings onto a plate and put the scallions or green onions on top. I also like to add some hot sauce and some sesame seeds, and you can serve it with any sauce that you like. I like to just do soy sauce, or sometimes I'll do 2 parts soy sauce and 1 part rice vinegar. And what's great about this recipe is that you can make it anytime you have leftovers, and it's a very impressive skill, but it also is way easier than it looks. So one night if you have a bunch of extra barbecue chicken, you could make it into dumplings, or if you have a bunch of vegetables that are gonna go bad soon, you can put them all in a pot and cook them together and cook them up like this. So it's a great one to make for friends or family or for an appetizer, and yeah, enjoy your vegan dumplings.